I still remember that night like it's tattooed on my skin. The smell of polished wood floors, the hum of the heater, the silence before everything went sideways. I was working the night shift in a mansion outside of Seattle, the kind of place with gates taller than apartment buildings and chandeliers so bright they could blind you. Folks called me Naomi Carter. 29 single working 2 jobs and sending every extra dollar to my aunt, who was fighting cancer back home in Detroit. It was around midnight when it happened. I was kneeling on the carpet in young Harper Lawson's room, 12 years old, sweet but shy, helping her change out of blood-stained pajama shorts. She'd come running to me, shaking eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. I knew that look. I'd seen it before. First period, first terror. I was showing her how to breathe, how to wrap a pad, whispering, "It's okay, baby girl, your body's just growing." Then the door slammed open like a gunshot. "What the hell are you doing to my daughter, Morgan Lawson?" Harper's mom stood there, all rage and Diamond's eyes wild. Before I could speak, she yanked Harper away, spitting, "You filthy liar," undressing my child in the middle of the night. "Mrs. Lawson," I said, trying to stay calm. She thought she was dying. She asked me to help, but Morgan wasn't hearing me. She swung her open palms so hard across my face I tasted iron instantly. My head snapped. My knees hit the dresser. I still hear Harper screaming, "Stop." She didn't hurt me, but the words just floated like smoke no one wanted to catch. And then came Chase Lawson, the dad fresh off a red-eye flight suit still on. He took one look at the blood on the sheets, my bleeding lip, his daughter's tears, and growled, "Pack your things. You're done here." I walked out of that mansion shaking a duffel bag on my shoulder, blood drying on my face, a pink box of pads left behind on Harper's nightstand. No job, no home, no plan, just this ache in my ribs and a voice in my head whispering about another girl years ago in another house who didn't survive the shame. For weeks, I lived in a cramped room over a retired couple's garage, worked days cleaning a diner, nights folding laundry for anyone who'd pay cash. My aunt's hospital bills stacked higher than the laundry. But somehow in that tiny space I found a little peace. I started volunteering at a community center reading to girls after school. They reminded me of Harper, awkward bright, scared of their own bodies. One rainy afternoon, a knock came at my door. It was Lucia, the quiet dishwasher from the Lawson estate, standing in the drizzle with a note. "Harper's not doing well," she said. "She barely eats. She keeps your box by her bed." Inside the note, the cook had written, "The ones who care carry more truth than the ones who rule." I pressed it to my chest and felt something harden and soften all at once. I knew I had to go back. Not for a paycheck, just to say my truth. When I walked into that mansion again months later, I wasn't the same woman. I stood in the grand hallway where my knees had hit the dresser, where my lip had split, and faced Morgan. She tried to keep her voice cold, but her eyes flickered. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here." "I'm not here to beg," I said. "I'm not here to accuse. I'm here because your daughter deserves to know the truth." Morgan folded her arms. "Fine. Speak." "That night you saw blood and panic. I saw a child terrified of her own body. I've seen what silence and shame can do. I wasn't going to let that happen again. You chose to see filth when all I did was comfort her." Her jaw tightened. "I thought I was protecting her." "No," I said softly. "You were protecting your fear, not your daughter." Right then, Harper bolted down the hallway and threw herself into my arms, sobbing. "I missed you," she whispered. Chase stood behind her, silent, watching the reunion with something like regret in his eyes. I handed Harper a small necklace, just a crescent moon charm, and whispered, "You're not broken. You're becoming." I left that house with my head high, but the truth of it clung to me. I kept volunteering. I spoke at small events, then bigger ones. Folks started listening not because I had fancy degrees, but because I'd been in the room when no one else would show up. I told girls, "Your body isn't disgusting. It's alive. It's sacred." Months rolled by. I wrote in my journal every night. One day a friend submitted my name to a statewide summit on women's voices. They wanted me to speak. Me, the former nanny. I stood on that stage in a maroon blouse and trembling hands and told a room full of strangers I didn't set out to be brave. I just refused to let a child feel alone the way I once did. People cried. They clapped. And for the first time in my life, I felt my story echo instead of evaporate. But the story didn't end there. Harper sent an anonymous letter to the police about what really happened that night. A detective called me in for an interview, and for the first time, the law looked at me not as disposable, but as a witness. The Lawsons faced their own reckoning. They settled privately, paid my aunt's medical bills, funded a program for domestic workers, and sent me a letter of apology so honest it made my hands shake. Still, I didn't run to forgive them. I poured myself into the community center. We started a writing circle for girls called Tender, Brave, Unbroken. They wrote poems about periods, about shame, about not being invisible anymore. I watched them find their voices like tiny flames catching fire. Harper began showing up there too. She volunteered to read to younger kids, wore that little moon necklace every day. One night after a workshop, she handed me a drawing of me surrounded by girls with wings. "You gave us flight," she said. I almost cried right there on the linoleum floor. Years later, when I published my book, The Housekeeper's Heart, I dedicated it to my aunt and every girl who'd ever been punished for bleeding. The launch wasn't fancy, just a circle of folding chairs, girls passing around cupcakes, a mural on the wall painted with hands lifting one another. But it was ours. Morgan Lawson showed up quietly at the back of the room. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The fact that she came meant something had shifted. Harper stood beside her, taller now, reading a speech at her school about justice and kindness. Seeing that I knew my pain hadn't been wasted. Sometimes people ask me if I regret going back to that house, if I regret speaking up. I tell them no. Because in the end, what saved me wasn't revenge. It was the refusal to disappear. It was turning shame into a bridge for the next girl to cross. And yet even now there's a part of this story folks argue about. Some say Morgan should have gone to jail. Some say I should have taken every dollar they had. Others say forgiveness is weakness. But I know this silence is where cruelty grows. The moment you name it out loud, you plant something stronger than shame. So now I'll ask you, what would you have done that night? If you saw blood on a child's pajamas, would you stop to listen or rush to judge? If someone stood up for you when the world turned its back, would you speak up later? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think justice means punishment or change. Tell me if you've ever been mistaken for something you're not. Because stories like mine aren't just mine. They're happening every day behind closed doors. And until we talk about them, really talk about them, they'll keep happening. This is Naomi Carter, signing off, still standing, still soft, still fighting, and hoping you'll help me make sure no child grows up thinking their body is something to be ashamed of. Hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Your words matter. Your voice might be the one that saves somebody else tonight.